You switch from deep work to check a single notification for 2 seconds.
You believe you have immediately returned to your previous state of focus. You have not. Your neural network is experiencing attentional residue. Part of your brain is mathematically stuck processing the previous task. To understand the sheer biological devastation of this daily habit, we must utterly dismantle the corporate myth of multitasking. Multitasking is a neurobiological impossibility. The human prefrontal cortex is physically incapable of processing 2 complex independent variables simultaneously. What you perceive as multitasking is defined in clinical neuroscience as rapid serial task switching. You are not executing 2 functions at once. You are violently whipping your cognitive focal point back and forth between 2 entirely different datasets. When you engage in deep, cognitively demanding work, such as writing a technical proposal or analyzing financial models, your brain must construct a highly complex, temporary architecture of information. This is clinically referred to as a cognitive schema. Your working memory retrieves the exact rules, the historical context, and the immediate objectives required for that specific task. Loading this vast neurological framework into your prefrontal cortex consumes a massive, highly concentrated volume of oxygenated glucose and ATP. And then your phone vibrates. It is a single message from a colleague. You assume that glancing at this message for 2 seconds is a harmless, momentary pause in your execution. You look away from your deep work. The moment your optic nerve registers the new text, your brain initiates a catastrophic biological pivot. It cannot process the incoming social interaction using the mathematical schema you built for the spreadsheet. The rule sets are fundamentally incompatible. Therefore, your executive control center must actively suppress the previous cognitive architecture. It must forcibly sweep the complex data from your working memory and rapidly construct an entirely new, distinct schema to decode the social context of the message. This sudden structural demolition and reconstruction requires a massive, immediate surge of cellular energy. You have just burned a highly measurable, significant percentage of your daily metabolic fuel merely to transition your attention to a trivial input. You read the message, you put the device face down, you look back at your primary monitor, entirely confident that you can immediately resume your complex calculation exactly where you left off. But the transition is mathematically flawed. Your brain must now attempt to dismantle the social schema and painstakingly rebuild the original, highly complex deep work architecture. But the reloading process is never perfectly clean. The human brain is a highly conservative survival machine. It does not cleanly sever neural pathways when switching contexts. It keeps the previous operation running quietly in the background, just in case you need to switch back rapidly. Because you checked a message requiring a future response, you have created an unclosed loop in your psychological software. And this unclosed loop immediately begins to bleed your cognitive bandwidth dry. This biological fragmentation is known as attentional residue. A highly measurable, significant percentage of your neurological processing power remains hopelessly stuck on the previous task, actively refusing to power down and rejoin the primary network. In clinical psychology, this is driven by the Zeigarnik Effect.
The brain is mathematically hardwired to remember and prioritize incomplete or interrupted tasks far more aggressively than tasks that have been successfully concluded. You are physically looking at the spreadsheet. Your hands are on the keyboard, but your background processors are actively, relentlessly calculating the emotional tone of the email you just read, drafting potential replies in your subconscious. This dual processing creates severe, unavoidable cognitive latency. Because a fraction of your biological RAM is occupied by the residue of the distraction, you are attempting to execute high-level, deep work on a fraction of your actual intellectual capacity. The mathematical consequences are immediate and devastating. Your error rate exponentially increases. Your ability to synthesize complex, abstract concepts is severely compromised. Your reading comprehension plummets, forcing you to reread the exact same paragraph repeatedly. You perceive this internal failure as sudden, inexplicable friction. The task suddenly feels physically heavier, vastly more difficult, and incredibly frustrating, simply because you lack the neurological leverage required to lift the data. You assume the work itself is difficult. You are incorrect. The work has not changed. You have simply handicapped your own biological hardware, forcing your prefrontal cortex to drag a heavy anchor of irrelevant information through the workflow. And the sheer duration of this cognitive penalty is what ultimately guarantees the total destruction of your daily output. Clinical research in human-computer interaction reveals a terrifying biological metric. Following a single, momentary distraction, the human brain does not instantly snap back into a state of peak execution. It requires a massive recovery phase. It takes an average of 23 to 25 minutes for your neural pathways to entirely clear the attentional residue, close the background loops, and mathematically achieve the exact depth of cognitive immersion you possessed before the interruption. Now, extrapolate this metric across your standard corporate workday. If you check your phone, open your inbox, or respond to a direct message every 15 minutes, you have engineered a catastrophic systemic failure. You mathematically never enter a state of deep work. You are perpetually resetting the 25-minute recovery timer. You spend your entire 8-hour workday existing in the shallow, high-friction, neurologically exhausting transition phase. You are trapped in a state of biological purgatory. This is exactly why you reach 2 in the afternoon feeling entirely depleted, absolutely exhausted, and deeply anxious, despite having achieved 0 meaningful professional output. You have burned your finite daily supply of ATP solely on the invisible metabolic overhead of loading and unloading conflicting cognitive schemas. You exhausted your brain on the transitions, leaving absolutely no fuel for the execution. This is the biological tax of constant connectivity. You believe you are highly responsive and hyper-productive. You are simply sacrificing your executive function to the chaotic, unprioritized demands of your external environment. You are not working. You are violently whipping your prefrontal cortex back and forth between infinite data streams until it forcefully shuts itself down to protect its own tissue. To eliminate this biological friction and reclaim your capacity for elite execution, you must ruthlessly isolate your attention. You must build an absolute cognitive firewall around your deep work. You must transition your behavior from continuous partial attention to strict, uncompromising batch processing. You must decouple your communication from your execution. When you enter a 90-minute block of deep work,
You must sever all external inputs entirely. 0 notifications, 0 inbox tabs. Your smartphone must be placed in another room to prevent the optical trigger of checking the screen. By entirely eliminating the micro switch, you allow your neural pathways to deeply solidify. The action potentials fire cleanly, without interruption. The cognitive context remains flawlessly intact, requiring a fraction of the maintenance energy. You retain 100% of your biological processing power. You execute complex tasks with terrifying velocity because you are no longer dragging the heavy anchor of attentional residue through your workflow. You have successfully severed the distractions. You have eliminated the latency. You have secured your cognitive firewall. But maintaining this pristine, high-performance firewall is biologically impossible if the physical posture of your spine is actively choking your brain of oxygen. Click here to discover the devastating biomechanics of postural asymmetry and learn exactly why slouching at your desk is mathematically suffocating your prefrontal cortex.